Welcome to another episode of the Daring to Transcend podcast. Today, we're going to head to Dallas, Texas, and we're going to dive into the world of business development. So stay tuned. Today, I'm excited to welcome Lauren Law to the Daring to Transcend podcast. Lauren is the Director of Business Development at the Loomis Agency and has spent more than 35 years in agency and corporate marketing roles. Lauren is a tireless promoter of the agency and a key contributor to the Loomis Agency culture. She makes huge contributions to new business efforts, as well as doing a masterful job in running the internship program and being an advocate for young advertising professionals. Lauren is also a creative spirit, and she has written a children's book series that she hopes one day to share with the world. She calls it her Old Lady Project, although we'll never ever admit to being old. And she also runs the recruitment for the summer internship program. She loves mentoring high school and college students who have an interest in entering the advertising field. So welcome, Lauren. I am very happy to have you with us today.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
So you have had an interesting journey from where you where you started and where you are now at the Loomis Agency. So let's start with how you got into advertising and, the world of marketing to begin with.
Okay. Well, when I was in college, I went to Southern Methodist SMU, and I started out getting a marketing degree in the business school. So I was going to get a BBA degree. And I started taking elective classes, and they were in advertising. And I thought, wow, I really like these classes. So I talked to my counselor and I said, how can I go about getting a degree in advertising and a degree in marketing? And so she advised me, and I went to summer school, and I went to some of those inter-term classes between semesters. And I was able to graduate in 4 years. And so during my college time period, I did a few internships, one at a PR agency, one at a media agency. And then after I graduated college, I did an internship at Universal Pictures in Universal City, California. And I wanted to be exposed to all the aspects of advertising. And the great thing about those internships is that they taught me what I didn't want to do. And I knew that I didn't want to go into PR or media. I loved being at Universal Pictures, but it just really wasn't the right place for me. I love your kitty. And so I came back to Dallas that summer after I graduated, and I got a job in this really small ad agency in a little suburb of Dallas called Mesquite, Texas. And John, who I worked for, gave me the opportunity to really delve into all aspects of the advertising field. So I was able to learn how to copyright ads, splice radio commercials together back when they, used to put the little tapes and splice it together, media placement, an account executive, and I did business development for that small agency. And it was just a really wonderful experience. And again, that taught me what I wanted to do and what I didn't. And so where I found my strengths were in account management and new business.
Okay. So I just want to stop you there for 1 second and back out for a minute, because I'm curious as to what particularly about advertising drew you when you were in college.
What the thing that appealed to me was the project management aspect of advertising. Being able to be exposed to a lot of different types of companies and learn about those companies, what made them tick, what made them successful, what some of their challenges were. And those are all things that you use when you're looking for prospects in business development. And so there was just something about advertising and the promotion and selling of a brand that appealed to me. But truthfully, the two disciplines, marketing and advertising, have served me well in my career. I've used both of those disciplines in just about every job that I've had.
So, which is really cool, because not everybody can say that they use their college degree and what they're doing, at least not directly. So yes. That's really awesome. So you found this smaller agency where you got to experience lots of things, learn where your gifts were, which clearly is is, to your point, business development, working with people. I think, I always look at business development as sort of the connection between, the customer and their needs. You're the one that, bridges that gap between the solutions your company provides and the customer needs. So I love that you pulled that together. So where did you go from there? Having identified that as your strength and your love, your passion, I guess. Where did you go from
there? I went to a mid-size agency in Dallas. It's no longer in existence. We had some really cool clients back in those days, and I worked for a division of the larger agency, and it was called SLW Creative Services. And we had our own clients, and there were mainly project clients, related clients, but they were big names. And so they had projects that they needed done, and, we would just get them in, get them out, get them in. And we were really the cash cow of that agency. We made so much money because we were constantly churning and getting new business in. And so at that agency, I was a new business person. I learned new business from my boss there, David. And then I also account managed those pieces of business. But we used mainly freelance talent. So there's one person that I worked with at that agency that I'm still connected to. And then when I went to my next job, which was on the client side, I went to a very large not-for-profit healthcare system here in Dallas and was recruited by an account executive that had been at the agency that I was at. She wanted me to come over there and work for her, which I resisted for about 6 months. I said, no, I'm happy. I'm good. I don't know if I was afraid of making the change or what, but I finally did go over there and worked for her in the marketing department. And she stayed about 6 months, left to get married. And then they hired another person from an agency background to be the director. And she came in and couldn't take it. She couldn't stand it. It was, much more bureaucratic and political than what she was accustomed to being on the agency side. Okay. And so I was like, okay, I've had two bosses in a year, but I'm doing this job. And so I went to my boss at the time, Marty, and I said, what can I do to get the director job? And she outlined everything that I needed to do to accomplish that. And so along the way, we had just completed this huge nurse recruiting campaign. We were asked by the University of Texas at Galveston to come and show the nurses and doctors this campaign, because at that time, in all over the country, there was a nurse recruiting shortage. And so we developed this comprehensive, multidisciplinary campaign, integrated campaign, everything but digital, because back there, digital did not exist. And we went down there and presented, and our senior vice president of marketing, Al, introduced me as the director of creative services and branding. And I was like, I didn't know I got a promotion. And so on the airport on the way back, I said, Al, did I get a promotion I'm not aware of? And he said, puffery. I've never forgotten that, puffery. He was trying to make me sound like he didn't want to introduce me as a manager. But anyway, I was going to be promoted. So a week later, I went with him and my boss, Marty, to lunch, and they promoted me to the director position.
Awesome. I love that story. And I love the puffery. It's interesting how we get attached to titles as, something that tells us, how good we are, how important we are. And, that obviously is part of our outward persona. And which is why your boss put this. Yeah, I love how he threw you off the track by saying puffery. That cracks me up. But it's interesting because in some ways he was also making himself look better, right, by promoting you and making you do that. So it was a huge room full of, I think there were like 100 to 150, maybe even 200 people. I'd never presented in front of a group like that before. So it kind of did actually give me a little boost, to be honest. I bet it did. Yeah. So it was great. But it was great that he also followed through and made good on that rather than just use it to make me seem bigger than I was, Not that I was big. I'm just saying, Yeah, no. I know exactly what you're saying. And it was probably one of those things that he wasn't quite at liberty to tell you that you actually got the promotion. I'm sure he knew that it was coming. So it was a way to boost your confidence while you were doing that big presentation. And I love that story.
That's one of my favorite stories.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's one of my favorite stories of, if you want something, you have to ask for it, and don't expect that you're going to get a promotion, because it's not going to happen. You have to be your own best advocate in the workforce. And I knew that I was doing that job. I knew I could do that job. I'd had by then probably 5 or 6 years of experience on the agency side. And so I was confident. I knew that I could do it. And so I simply just asked. And that's the advice that I give to some of the younger people today coming into the agency world here, even at Loomis, is that, you have to be your own best advocate and figure out where you want to go, and then have a good relationship with your boss and talk to your boss about what you need and what you want. And they'll either work with you or they won't.
Right. And I love how you asked, right? It wasn't like you went in and said, okay, I've been doing this job, but, we've gone through 2 people. I'm doing this job anyway. So, just give it to me. Right. Which people can sometimes do. And then you put someone on the defensive. I love that you said, okay, what do I need to do to get there? And I love that your boss actually gave you a list of things to do, because sometimes that's not always easy to do also. Right. Especially, so obviously she had put some thought into what she was looking for as well, which is, very important, both directions.
Yeah. Yeah. I was very lucky to have such great support in my boss at the time. And yeah.
Yeah. Well, having a good boss, and to your point, developing a good relationship with your boss is so important, no matter what level of the organization you are. Whether you're at the top of, close to the top of the organization, working with the board of directors or the CEO, or whether you're working your way up, it really doesn't matter. Having those, good relationships up and down.
Definitely.
The hierarchy is
keeping those relationships and not burning bridges. These are all pieces of advice I get, because, you never know. One day, somebody here who's younger than I am could end up being my boss. And I have friends who have been in the workforce for years and years, and they're reporting to people who are younger than them. And anyway, you have to keep those relationships solid and work on them, nurture them, and, just leave yourself in a good place, even if you do leave a job.
And be flexible with them, right?
Right.
Because to your point, the roles are always changing. And it's, your relationships change as you grow, your relationships change as other people grow. So your point about nurturing them is really, really important. So you went, from the agency side to working for the healthcare system, and you were there for a while, if I remember.
I was there for over 20 years.
Wow.
And I had a little scare the last year that I was there, and thought I was having a heart attack, but it wasn't. I got in the ambulance, went to the hospital, had all the signs and symptoms. They did test, X-ray, EKG. I did a stress test, all of that, and it wasn't. What I think it was, well, we had basically just put out a huge campaign, one of the biggest campaigns that we'd ever worked on at the system. So there was a lot of stress and pressure related to that. But my mom passed away when I was in college. I was a junior in college, and I was about the same age as she was. And I kind of just felt like maybe she was nudging me, saying, get off of this treadmill, because my son was going to be 5 that March. And I started thinking about just all the time I had lost with him, because, it can be kind of a rat race. You get him up, get him dressed, feed him, put him in the car, take him to daycare. And then at 6:15, right before they're going to fine you for being late, pick him up, take him home, give him a bath, feed him, read to him, put him in bed. And it did that for 5 years. And I was missing being with him. And then I realized he's going to be in kindergarten this fall. And, we had a good life, and, we honestly let him stay up later than he probably should have, just because we both worked and wanted to be with him after we got home from work. But I think it was time for me to go. And, I left June 2nd of that year, which was the 26th anniversary of my mom's death. that date has such significance to me in so many ways. And that way I was going to be able to be with him all summer before he started kindergarten. And the next morning, I woke up with the words to this children's rhyming series in my head. It started out with one, and I wrote it on back then we had Blackberries. I laid in bed and I wrote it out on my Blackberry. They're short little rhymes. And I've always loved poetry. And my mother loved poetry. So it was just kind of weird. It's like,
that is weird.
It all came out. And then I got into the shower and was thinking about it. And I was like, where did that come from? I kind of knew where that one came from because it's called If a Fish Had Fingers. And we went on my son and I and another little boy went on to a fishing trip. And we're sitting there with our feet dangling off the dock. And I was like, hey guys, what if a fish had fingers? And they started saying, yeah, if he had one, he could play guitar, he could play in a band, he could pick his nose, he could do a handstand. So we're
little boys have to get that. I have to get something in. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I kind of knew where that one came from. But then when I was in the shower, I got out and I just rattled like 7 more of them off. And I was like, what in the heck is happening to me? But that night I had a dream. And if anybody's seen The Green Mile, there's a scene where the guy who takes on the cancers and stuff of other people, he blows there's these white things that come out of him. Well, these white things were coming out of my ears. And then there were these little red things in between. And I was like, okay, I dream a lot. And I try to interpret my dreams. And I interpreted that as me letting go of 20 plus years of healthcare and probably the rest of it, that I'd done prior to that. And the red things were ladybugs. And to me, that represented like the future and luck. And like there was something different out for me out there.
Interesting. And I love that. And I'm just going to stop you for 1 minute because I think one of the things that we don't realize, and although how this happens so quickly to you is, you switch from that stress mode into a different mode and you turn off all of that, constant dizziness in your head where you're thinking about, I need to do this and I need to do that. And you've got all the projects that you're doing and all of that stuff. And you turn that stress off and then all of a sudden the creativity starts.
Yeah.
And, I know for me as a writer, it's really important for me to get out of stress mode in order to be at my most creative when I'm writing and creating fiction. And I think we lose sight of that in the business world often, where we're so focused on deadlines and getting things done and doing all this, that the space for creativity, that we don't realize how much that stress is dampening our creativity.
I think that's exactly what happened to me. It's like, okay, I'm done with that chapter and my mind just opened up. I honestly believe, I do believe that dream had some impact on my next morning creativity. So I kept writing and I wrote about 30 of them in the series. And then when the fall came around, that was in the summer, when the fall came around and Nick started kindergarten, loved his kindergarten teacher. And I said, can I come read some of these to you? Because I have no idea where they came from, but I'd like to just get a read from the students, right? Those kids loved those rhymes. And they were like requesting, like, what if a fish played soccer? What if a fish was an artist? What if a fish played football? What if a fish? And I was like, I had the book. So I basically printed them all out and put them in a binder. And I was like, I have that one. And so real. And they were so engaged. And I was like, okay, I've got something here. I had the school librarian read them. She gave me some input. I talked with a publisher, and they were going to charge me $50,000 to do a 32-page book. And I'm like, no, not going to do that. And so then by the end of that year, I had written about 40 in that series, but I had written a whole bunch of other things. Like, just my mind just exploded. And I think it's because I was tapping into my son and his 5-year-oldness and all of the kids, because I volunteered. That is one thing. When I left that huge job, I volunteered. That is something I never gave myself time to do.
Yeah.
So I was at school all the time, going to the events and being homeroom mom and all that stuff. So I was around a bunch of little kids. So I think that helped. But by the end of that year, I decided I was going to go to a writers conference I had read about that was going to be in San Francisco in February. So I clicked the button for the early bird on December 31st of that year and went to that conference. And
so cool. I love how that you just went all in with it.
I did. I even developed a website back then. I followed everything that they said to do at the conference, but it just wasn't the right time for me to publish because honestly, I was afraid of the cost of the illustrations. And I knew I was going to have to budget for that. I was going to have to budget for an editor. I truly believe I'm going to have every one of those stories looked at by an editor before I publish.
Yes. You have to have a good editor. Good editors are just...
So anyway, I knew that there would be costs associated with publishing the book. So I decided to put it on the back burner. I continued to do marketing consulting while I was at home with my son, and I stayed home with him till he was a freshman. I gave up a lot of income. I'm not going to kid you. I mean, I was making a really, really nice income. But I decided it was more important for me in my life and our son's life and my husband's life for me to be there for him. And I'll never regret that decision. And so I did that. And then when he was a freshman in high school, he was never home. And I was like, okay, this is a sign.
That's when it happens when, okay, mom suddenly is persona non grata and I want to be with my friends and mom is not cool anymore. And, all of that fun stuff. Yeah, totally.
Exactly. So I decided it was time for me to come back in, and I had 3 interviews. One of them was at a healthcare company, and I walked in and I got the heebie-jeebies. I was like, oh, I can't come back to this because, I'd been creative. Not that you can't be creative there, because we did some really good creative work when I was at the health system. Right. But I wasn't ready to go back into that chapter.
Okay.
And I actually interviewed for another marketing director position at a hospital, and this was a little bit later, but I was kind of ready to do that, but then I wasn't. And then one was a development position for college prep school, and the other one was this position at Loomis. And I had an opportunity to come here and have a great work-life balance, and this is where I've been for 6 years, and I love it.
And I love that. And I love that you, it sounds like you did a great job of bridging that time from when you left working full time to when you went back working. But you did some consulting. You kept your skill sets. You kept your fingers at least a little bit in the pot. Along the way.
I did have a healthcare client in Wichita Falls, Texas, and the marketing director there was one of my internal clients when I was at the nonprofit health system.
Okay.
We worked together for several years, did some fun work. I have a lot of it posted on my LinkedIn. And then I did some other things. I never had a website. Anything that I did was all on a referral basis. And so I could stay as busy as I wanted. And if I didn't want to work at a particular time and go on a field trip to the Arboretum with the kids, I could do that. It was really perfect. I really, really liked it. But yes, and I did a lot of webinars. I stayed up on what was going on in the industry because I knew one day I was going to go back to work.
Right. And I think that's really important. I mean, a lot of times we hear that, women leave the workplace and then they come back and they can't get hired at any kind of decent level. And, they're not considered relevant anymore. And, that's a hard... that's hard because women feel like, okay, if I don't stay in the workplace and keep pushing to move forward, I'm going to be left behind. And then when I want to come back, I'm just going to have to be, right. Start all over again. And
one of the things when I talk to college students, I tell them to keep track of your successes along the way of your career, so that when you go to interview for a job, you can call on that experience. And so even when I was working with the few clients that I had, I was doing a lot of events, and I kept track of, fundraising, how much we raised, and just all the KPIs related to that particular event. And I kept a running list. And so I was able to draw on that when I needed it for, interviewing purposes and so forth.
Which is great, which is a great way to, I mean, obviously not everybody has that luxury based on, their skill sets. But I think most people can find ways to use their skills, even if it's in volunteering, right? Even if it's in other ways. And still, I love the idea of keeping track of your successes and having that. Say when you do want to go back to the workplace, okay, yeah, I wasn't officially in the workplace, but I was doing all these things. I accomplished all these things. I wasn't just sitting around eating bonbons, which, obviously
Exactly.
very few of us do.
Oh, yeah. I mean, being PTA president, that's a lot of work. That
It
requires
is.
leadership skills, the ability to delegate. I mean, there's a lot of things involved in a position like that. So anyway,
Yeah, no, and I love that. And I love that you were able to bring that forward and, you enter the workplace, I guess, more as an employee again, more officially, even after taking that time off. And I think that's a credit. I think we talked about what, success means to different people. Right. And you clearly were, in a very successful role. You had the health scare. And so often we hear that where people, their bodies suddenly tell them, whoa, time out, wait a minute. You're not necessarily on the right track here.
sure.
And you listened. Of course, you had your mother's experience to draw from too, but you listened to that experience and you said, okay, I'm going to take a time off. I'm going to go into a different direction. And I think that is so important. It's such something that we don't always do.
Yes. I mean, I try to listen to my body all the time. If I'm playing pickleball and my knee hurts, don't play this week. It's just, I think as you age and you just get wiser, about things and realize what's important. And to me, at that point in my life, my family was the most important thing, and my health, and so you don't have your health, that makes everything else difficult.
Yeah. So your definition of success changed, right? Because of that health scare. Your definition of, okay, I don't need to be climbing the corporate ladder right now. I don't need to be doing this full-time job. There's other things that I can be doing. I can still contribute.
Right.
My success isn't necessarily now going to be measured by a title and a salary. And so often we feel like our success has to be measured by a title and a salary.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you redefine success for yourself.
That's right. And I think that, when I was younger, I was tough and driven and goal oriented, and I'm still all of those things. But I also think that whole experience kind of enhanced and helped me grow as a person to become the best version of me that I can be. And I will never, ever regret staying home with my son. He's flourishing. He just graduated college in 3 years, and, he's going to be coaching in the football world for college, and he's going to get his master's this fall. So we're super proud of him. And I just think, for me, it's not for everyone. There are a lot of women who work and take care of their kids. But for me, that was the best decision for me at the time and for our family.
Yeah. And to your point, it's the best decision for you. It's not, this is not a one size fits all world. And
right.
So often we feel like, okay, this is the only way to be successful. This is the only way to get what I want is, I can have my kids, but I have to stay working. I have to stay in the workforce. I have to climb the ladder. I have to follow this current trajectory specifically. And that works for some people, and that's great. And then if that works, that's awesome. There's nothing wrong with that. And there's nothing wrong with, completely disengaging from the workforce, to focus on your family or finding a balance. And it really, success is really a personal decision. But so often we make success, we measure our own success by what other people think and what other people's version of success is.
You're right. I think my definition of success has changed. And for me now, where I am in my career, my definition of success is seeing the next generation of people that I get to talk to and advise and share what I've learned, is just seeing them grow and flourish and move ahead in the industry. I mean, that I love that. And especially with the interns that I recruit, it's seeing the potential in these kids. And we actually have a class starting on Monday. And I feel like I kind of equate it to like birthing the babies. So this couplets are coming on Monday, and then we're turning them over to a great group of individuals in the agency led by a wonderful account director here. And she has that same spirit of mentoring and wanting to help. And so does our director, who's going to be mentoring the two creative talents that are coming in. And so it's just a really, really good program, and it's a huge team effort, but the recruiting of it's tough, but it's also rewarding to sift through as many people as that we get in and find just those right individuals that will fit in here at Loomis. And hopefully they'll either decide that advertising agency work is for them, like I did back in the day, or not.
Yeah,
it's on the platform.
Yeah, because you're giving them an opportunity to learn and be mentored. And I think, I hear that so often with women who, get to a certain point in their careers, a certain point in their lives, and success then does become more about the impacts that you're making.
Mm-hmm.
I know for me, success is more about the impacts that I'm making, which is why I, do my podcast and I write my books and I tell the stories of women leaders, because I want to help women leaders like you make more of an impact in the world, help people see leadership and corporations and possibilities that maybe they haven't seen before. So thank you so much for sharing your wisdom with us today.
Of course.
I'm excited to see where you're going next with all of this.
Well, I'm going to publish those books one of these days.
All right. Well, I'll be looking for them.
I will keep you posted for sure. We're connected on LinkedIn now, and so I will definitely let you know.
Absolutely. I can't wait to hear about it. So if other people want to hear about your books in the future or want to learn more about the Loomis Agency or about Lauren, how do they get in touch with you?
They can go to our website, theLoomisAgency.com. My profile is actually on the people page, so you can connect through LinkedIn, or you can send a contact form through our website, and I'd be happy to connect with you.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining us today, Lauren. I really appreciate everything that you've shared. What a great, inspiring story. And thank you for joining us for this episode of the Daring to Transcend podcast. If you want to learn more about me and my work, go to my website, which is daringtotranscend.com, or check out my books, my fiction books on Amazon or your favorite bookseller. In the meantime, we'll see you next week on the Daring to Transcend podcast.